Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at a hinge that I don't see very often. This would be a Hager. They call it BB1199 5x8. They've dropped the WT in the part number. I would know this in the price book as a WT BB1199 5x8 US 3 NRP. This is one hinge inside of here. This is a pretty epic hinge, and I have been anxiously waiting for it to arrive so that I could review it. It's not often that you see a wide throw, heavyweight, non-ferrous base material hinge. And that's what this is. This hinge, good for them. It looks good. Oh, it looks good. Okay. Not every Hager hinge that I get looks good. Hager knows it, and this hinge looks good. Just to address that, what I mean is this hinge looks good. This may be the best looking Hager hinge I've ever seen. Specifically what I'm referring to is in the crotch of the hinge, in here. Hager, I've seen Hager hinges that were not finished nearly as well as they ought to be, but they've done a good job on this one. This hinge looks beautiful. This is going to a country club in Miami. There's probably 50 country clubs in Miami. This is going to go on to, obviously, a really special application. It's beautiful. I'll tell you what else, since we're talking about what I like about it. Their logo. It's petite. It's petite. It doesn't overwhelm the hinge. It's not this huge amount of corporate advertising. It probably looks petite because the size of the hinge is anything but petite, but it looks really great. That's a beautiful hinge. This hinge is made of solid brass. This hinge has a polished finish and a lacquer on it. Let me get over my fanboy response to this, wiping it off with a chamois. Let's dissect the part number. So I would know this as a WT. That's wide throw. I would know that to be any hinge that is wider than it is tall, a wide throw hinge. If you had a 4x3.5, I wouldn't call that a wide throw. I would just call it BB1199 4x3.5, meaning any hinge that's not square is usually wide throw. Occasionally, very occasionally, you will have hinges that are narrower than they are tall. The most common example would be a 4.5x4. That is industry standard, I believe, in the aluminum storefront business. And it ought to be used a lot more than it is now in the commercial wood door and hollow metal business, because the vertical axis of pivoting of the barrel of the knuckle, you want to have it brought as close to the door and frame as the application will permit. A 4.5 is the go-to hinge that everyone uses. That leaves that barrel hang off a little bit excessive, and if you have a knockdown steel hollow metal drywall type frames that's going to wrap over your partition wall, and your door can swing 180 degrees, or until it hits a doorstop or something else, bring that hinge pin in closer. Go with the 4-inch wide hinge, and it will draw it in closer. When you have a hallway and doors swing out into the hallway, you know, you can really see that projecting hardware if you take notice of it. Well, in the case of a WT from Hager, it's wider than it is tall, and this is a 5x8. What's important to know about that is the height is the first dimension on hinges. Whether it be 4.5x4.5, 5x8, 4x3.5, the height is what we're talking about when we talk about the first dimension. There are conventions for all types of hardware. The door, the first dimension is the width. The kick plate, the first dimension is the height. In a louver, the first dimension is the width. In a hinge, the first dimension is the height. In an access panel, the second dimension is the dimension that has the hinge on it. So you do have to memorize the convention. So 5-inch wide. It's going to be, 5-inch tall, 8-inch wide. Really huge hinge. You can always tell solid brass base material compared to plated over steel. Actual brass, and it doesn't even, this camera does not even begin to give you an idea of how warm and rich the solid base material looks. It just looks like it's solid brass. Okay, there's no substitution for it. So wide throw. They're going to be able to do this Hinge in, 4x5, 4x6, 4x7 probably, 4.5 by 5, 6, and 7, maybe even 8, 5x6, 5x7, 5x8. They'll be able to do it. They can likely do larger sizes, but I never encounter a hinge wider than 8-inch in terms of something that I would actually expect to sell. But I have certainly had requests made of much wider hinges, 16-inch, 20-inch. Those hinges, while they can be manufactured, are generally done so for historic preservation. The original state capitol in the state of Iowa, which is in Iowa City, that Capitol building has extreme wide throw hinges. They could be 20-inch. The reason is that that building is a 2 or 3 story building. It has the Capitol dome on top. The point of the matter is, why are these hinges so huge in the width? On the second floor is where all the state, congressmen would meet. The reason those hinges are so big is because the first floor walls are really thick, incredibly thick. Why? To carry the weight of everything above it. When that building was built in sometime in the mid-19th century or thereabouts, don't quote me, I don't know when the state capitol building in Iowa was built, but there's no structural steel. So those walls are really thick. The state capitol building in Texas are all wide throw hinges. And you're going to use a wide throw hinge, and this is really the heart of the matter, when you have a condition of the door in relationship to the outside of the frame that requires the movement of the vertical axis of pivoting further away, meaning the dimension from, let's say, here to here, or here, or here. When you have a door that is in relationship to the edge of the frame where it requires a wide throw hinge, or you could have a door in the standard position in the frame, but you've got all this extra stuff stuck on the outside of the frame, like shutters, brick mold, some sort of obstacle. What I'm referring to is what's called the inset. If you stand on the pull side of a door, the door, a commercial steel door, is going to be inset ever so slightly, 3/32 of an inch, something like that. An aluminum door and frame will be that, or it can be flush. A wood door and a frame can be inset slightly or flush. Well, imagine if your inset was 3 inches, okay, for whatever reason. In interior wood frame construction, you could slap in a regular pre-hung, but your walls are thicker. So what does the wood door distributor sell to the carpenter, contractor, installer? Jamb extensions. So if you need jamb extensions, you're going to need hinges that are either raised barrel or wide throw. Wide throw hinges do not affect the closing action. It's a question that I get. In a square edge door, if my knuckles here represent the outside corner of the door, a wide throw hinge does not at all impede how a door closes. If I move my pivoting axis out further away, it doesn't impede that. Even though logic kind of tells us that it does, it won't impede that whatsoever. That's a common question. So wide throw hinges are used when you have an inset condition that requires you to pull that vertical axis of pivoting out, because you won't get the door much past 90 degree, because the vertical axis of pivoting is on the interior face of where the jamb would be. And that, in those instances, you can see a raised barrel hinge. If you want the door to go to 90 degree and you're not concerned, a raised barrel hinge will work when you have a jamb extension. You could have an 8-inch cinder block wall, 5 3/4 frame, and you want that door to go to 180 degree. That frame's going to be centered in that 8-inch. Okay, so you're going to have 8 minus 5 3/4, 2 1/4. That frame is nominally 1 1/8 inside the face of the frame, your standard 4.5 4.5 is not going to get you out and around to 180 degree. A 4.5 by 6 would do the job. So now you can start to see where wide throw hinges come into play. This application, I don't have the math on why the client required 8-inch, but here's for sure what we know. It's a 5-inch tall hinge, so his door thickness is at least 2-inch thick. So he may have, it's Miami, a country club. It could certainly be Art Deco period. It might just simply be thick walls, doors from common areas to restaurants to pro shops, things of that nature. Other common areas, meeting areas, banquet hall areas. And they might have thick walls, and they might have really thick doors, big doors. They probably have big doors because this is an 1199. We'll go over that in a moment. So that's where you're going to be really thinking about those applications where you have either a frame condition, a casing, brick mold, shutters applied to the face of the opening, and you still want the doors to wrap out and around condition, or a deep inset. Or I've even seen doors in New York City. There's a restaurant who takes deliveries. Well, if you've been to New York, you realize how compressed and how valuable every square inch is. They had 4 doors that were about 30-inch wide. They took one door, folded it this way, then took doors 2 and 3 and folded it against door 3, took door 3 and folded that all against the wall. So all 4 doors could stack together and get out of the way. And if you lay all of that out in your head and you sketch out the dimensions required, you're going to need wide throw hinges that are going to be progressively wider than the previous set. That's a real interesting application of that stuff. Now let's move on in the part number dissection. Now, as we move through this part number, we're now at 1199. The 1199 from Hager all conspires to mean a number of things. In no particular order. It's going to mean we're dealing with a 5-knuckle hinge. You can see from the hinge, it's a 5-knuckle hinge. It is a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves there, here, that when the hinge is brought, when the leaves are brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. Okay? It means that it is a heavyweight hinge. This hinge is 190 thousandths. That is the standard size for a 5-inch tall hinge, regardless in a heavyweight, regardless of its width. 190. My caliper tells me on the money, Hager. 0.190 on the money. That's unusual. It tells us that it is a non-ferrous base material. So it's full mortise, heavyweight, 5-knuckle, non-ferrous base material. In the case where we're dealing with 605 or US 3, it should be called 605, we know that it's made of brass because it's non-ferrous. Brass, bronze, stainless, steel. Brass or bronze or stainless steel base material or steel base material. The last 9 in the part number, pardon me, the first 9 in the part number, start over. 1199, all of that together means brass base material. You could order a BB1199 in 32D and it would be a stainless steel base material. So that's how that goes. And that's all that conspires to mean all of that. Now there is a link below this video to a document called Template that will allow you to review all of the dimensional properties of the hinge in relationship to where everything's located, in particular the holes for the screws. That's a template pattern. That is a standardized pattern. If this was a normal width hinge, it would look certainly normal, but those screw hole locations, any hinge that you would slap onto the door and frame would work. 4.5, 4.5, 4.5 by 6, 7, 8, 5. This is a 5-inch hinge, obviously. So the location of the screw holes doesn't change. The only thing that changes is dimension F on the paperwork, which is here to where that swag line starts. Right where the bend starts is dimension F. Okay? That template is going to be good for other hinge models as well. There's 700, well, in this case, 800, 1191. The 1191 is the same hinge in a standard weight. 5 knuckle, non-ferrous, full mortise, standard weight. It'd be 140 thousandths on a 5-inch tall hinge. AB 800, AB 850. You see those different model numbers there. The template applies to all of those. This is a 5-inch standard on the screw hole locations. Speaking of that, screws are included. Be mindful, they're not made of steel, but I'm really tempted to say that they're stainless steel because they were marginally magnetic. Stainless does, imparted in the process of machining stainless, is some magnetism. I would say that these are very likely plated over stainless base material. Now you got to be really careful here because you got 4 wood screws and you got 8 machine screws. I would say that that's wrong. If I was going to expect this to be installed on something, it would be a wood door and a wood frame. By all means, qualify the screws that you require at the time of order. This client happened to have a steel frame and a wood door. It just happened to work that way. So we didn't have to qualify all wood screws. You know, half machine screws, half wood screws. Qualify it at the time so that we can pass that information to the manufacturer so that you get the proper quantity of screws. You don't want to get this expensive hinge in your hands, ready to install it, to realize I'm way short of hinge screws, and then there's no fast way to get any more. So be mindful of that. There's only 4 wood screws in there. They're a number 12. The machine screws are a 1224 thread with a flat undercut head. Undercut head is the feature to the underside of the head of the screw where it's flat. It's a flat head, but it's undercut, and that permits a flathead screw to sit flush onto a thin piece of relatively thin material, whereas a traditional flathead screw just wouldn't sit flush because the flathead, the height of the head of the screw, is just too great. So the template's really handy to review. Now moving a little bit further into the product catalog, this catalog is going to show us lots of hinge options from Hager. If you're looking at a WTBB1199, the other hinge that you might want to consider would obviously be a WTBB1168. Same hinge, just a ferrous base material. It'd be made of steel. If you don't need non-ferrous base material, you might want to consider the WTAB850. That's on the 3rd page of that document. Why would you want that hinge? It's an 850 versus an 1199. Still a wide throw. The difference is going to be that you're going to have a 3-knuckle hinge, which in my opinion and many others is a better looking hinge. This hinge knuckle seems to kind of detract away when you're looking at all that busyness. The A850 hinge is not only a 3-knuckle hinge, but the bearings are concealed. You don't see any of these bearing packets. Okay, far less attractive. That hinge is going to be more money, no doubt, but it is a more beautiful hinge in the sense of it being cleaner looking, maybe a bit more modern. You can scroll through there and look at how all of their the different part numbers that they have for hinges. I won't detail all of them here. You can do that. Then there is extended description information down below, and suffice it to say, you can order this hinge in any finish that can be done on brass or bronze. Your satins, your nickels, your brasses, your bronzes, your chromes, satin polished. It's Hager, so they have the capability of doing, you know, almost any finish you want. If for some reason you wanted this powder-coated black, because you want black and you need non-ferrous and you need 5-knuckle full mortise heavyweight, they probably can do that as well. I know that other people can. I imagine Hager can as well. And the information down below this video, the only topic we've not touched on, and the only thing you might consider would be a decorative tip. You can do on this hinge a ball. This is what's called a button tip. Button tip. Okay? Button on your coat. Imagine if you were doing this country club, a ball tip might be appropriate. A steeple tip, an urn tip might be okay. This happens to be a non-removable pin, an NRP. You'll notice that there is a tiny little feature to this hinge. Well, that's a drilled and tapped hole that has a set screw in it. That's a non-removable feature. What does that tell us about the hinge? Now, the reason you would have a security pin hinge is when you have an outside door, an exterior door that swings out. That means, notice where that NRP set screw is. From the exterior side of the hinge, not only can you not get to that set screw, but you can't see it. What happens is in the barrel of this hinge, in the hinge pin itself, if I were to drive that hinge pin out, I put a small center punch in there, I could drive that pin out, which would be stainless steel, by the way. It's going to have a groove cut in the side of it. That groove is going to allow, when you tighten the set screw, to seat into the groove, preventing you from driving it out. And believe you me, it's all but impossible to drive that out. I've actually tried. It proved to be I could not get in the door by driving. I drove all the pins out. Pardon me. I needed to get into the door. Could not drive any of the pins out. Gave up after 10 minutes. Just it didn't happen. It wasn't happening. There are other security options, meaning you could do a safety stud. Now, in your mind's eye, imagine a disc somewhere in this hinge leaf, about the size of a quarter, about the diameter of a nickel, about 3/8 thick, that's projecting on one side. Well, there's a hole on the other side, and when you close that leaf, that safety stud fits into that hole. Even if you were to drive the pin out, doesn't matter. You won't separate the leaves because of that safety stud. They also have a reverse safety stud. Now, that same nickel diameter, 3/8 thick, is on the back side, fitting into a preparation in the leaf of the door or the frame, or obviously both. So now you don't have to substantially interrupt the look of your hinges at all. You don't have a hole in the hinge. You don't have a big piece of material there completely concealed because it's in the back side. You never see the fact that there's reverse safety studs. Really ingenious. If I was going to do a heavy-duty application, I would want a WTAB850 concealed 3-knuckle reverse safety studs. Gorgeous hinge. Absolutely. Non-removable pin is for exterior doors that swing out, or any application where you don't want someone to drive the pins out. It could be interior, but it could be an outswing door in a country club application. It could be some sort of access to back-of-house operations where you might store liquor. You could have a liquor storage where you have thousands, tens of thousands of dollars of product stored, and because that is accessible and visible, you might have the same hinge. You might be an interior application and you're just going to secure that so someone can't tap those pins out. You could do radiused corners, 1/4 or 5/8. I have never seen a wide throw. That's a lie. I have done a wide throw hinge with a radiused corner. A client somewhere in Scandinavia had an unusual application and he needed 5/8 radius. Wasn't a 5x8, but it was something unusual, and it did have radius corners, so it's possible. You might want radius corners for some reason. Okay, that sums up everything on this Hager hinge. There is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all things Hager that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Any questions on this Hager WTBB1199 5x8 605 NRP hinge, or any other Hager product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.